Hi there, I'm Marcus. I'm 28 years old, and I work at a big bank in Dallas, Texas. Dallas is a busy place with tall buildings and lots of cars everywhere. The sun shines hot here most days, and people wear cowboy boots even to work sometimes. But Dallas never really felt like my real home. I grew up here with my stepfamily, but I always felt like I was watching their life from the outside, like I was looking through a window at a party I wasn't invited to. I don't remember much about how I became part of this family. My stepmom, Carol, only told me bits and pieces when she was mad at me. "We took you in when nobody else wanted you," she would say with angry eyes. "You should be grateful for what we gave you." I came to live with them when I was just a tiny baby, only a few months old. Carol and my stepdad, Mike, lived in a big house with a swimming pool and fancy cars in the garage. They had two kids of their own, Tyler, who was 1 year younger than me, and Sophie, who was 4 years younger. On paper, I was their brother, but in their hearts, I was just someone taking up space. From when I was very small, I knew something was different about me. It wasn't just that my green eyes and red hair looked nothing like anyone else in the family. The real difference was how they treated me. When we went to school events, Carol would point to Tyler and Sophie and say, "These are my children." But when she got to me, she would just say, "This is Marcus," like I was a neighbor kid who tagged along. The word son was too special to waste on me. I remember being 8 years old at a family barbecue in our backyard. Everyone was taking pictures by the pool, laughing and having fun. When I tried to join the picture, Tyler pushed me away. "You're not really family," he said, like it was obvious. Carol just smiled and kept taking pictures. I stood by the fence watching everyone laugh while I felt invisible. All my hard work to make them notice me didn't matter. I got good grades and brought home gold stars from my teacher. I helped Carol clean the kitchen and folded towels the way she liked. But all I ever got back was a quick, "okay," or nothing at all. One night, I heard Carol talking to Mike in their bedroom when they thought I was sleeping. "He tries so hard because he knows he has to earn his place here. We gave him everything. He owes us big time." Those words felt like someone punched me in the stomach. I wasn't their son. I was just someone who had to work to stay. But there was one person who made me feel like I mattered. My grandpa, Joe. He lived in a small town 2 hours away where there were more horses than people, and you could see a million stars at night. Every summer when school ended, I got to stay with him. Those months were the only time I felt happy and loved. Grandpa never called me Marcus in that cold way everyone else did. To him, I was Buddy or my special boy. He taught me how to ride horses in his big field behind the house. He showed me how to catch fish in the little creek that ran through his land. And at night, we would sit on his front steps while he played songs on his harmonica, and I would hum along, even though I wasn't very good at it. Grandpa was the only one who really saw me for who I was inside. When I was 11, I sat with him on his old wooden swing, watching the sun go down behind the trees. I asked him something that had been bothering me for a long time. "Grandpa, why don't Mom and Dad love me like they love Tyler and Sophie?" He stopped playing his harmonica and put his hand on my head. His eyes, which had lines around them from smiling so much, looked sad and angry at the same time. "Marcus," he said in his deep, warm voice, "you're the most wonderful thing that family doesn't know how to see. Don't let your good heart depend on how they treat you. You're worth more than gold, Buddy." Those words stuck in my head like a song I couldn't forget. They helped me get through the hardest days. I also remember another time when Grandpa and I were sitting by the creek, watching the water flow over the rocks. Out of nowhere, he asked me, "Do you ever wonder about your real mom?" That question made my heart beat fast. I hadn't thought much about her because Carol always said my real mom was young and couldn't take care of me properly. But the way Grandpa asked made me think there was more to the story. "I don't know," I said, feeling scared and curious at the same time. I guess she didn't want me. Grandpa took my small hand in his big rough one. "Don't ever think that, Buddy. There are things about your story that you don't know yet. But someday, when you're ready, you'll learn the truth." Those mysterious words planted a seed in my mind. I started wondering if maybe my life had secrets I didn't know about. But the warm feeling from those summers with Grandpa couldn't fix the cold feeling I had the rest of the year. Every time I went back to Dallas, I faced the same old problems. Tyler saw me as competition. He didn't need to worry about. He would make fun of me in front of his friends, calling me the extra kid when he thought adults couldn't hear. Sophie was different. She wasn't mean to me, but she looked at me like I was a stranger who happened to live in the same house. I kept trying not to let it break my heart. I told myself that if I worked harder, got better grades, and behaved perfectly, maybe one day they would see me differently. But deep down, I knew that hope was like a soap bubble that would pop. Every morning, I woke up in my small room at the back of the house. It was the only bedroom without big windows facing the front yard. Tyler and Sophie had huge rooms with their own TVs and video games, while mine had just a bed, a small desk, and a lamp that flickered sometimes. I never complained because complaining only made Carol frown and say, "You should be thankful you have a roof over your head." But every time I walked down the hallway, I felt like a guest in someone else's house. There's one day I'll never forget. When I was 13, the family threw a big birthday party for Sophie. The living room had balloons everywhere and a huge cake with pink frosting. I had spent 2 weeks making her a photo album with pictures of our family, hoping she would like it. I wrapped it in shiny paper and put a big bow on top. When Sophie opened my gift, she looked at it for about 2 seconds, then put aside to open more expensive presents. A new phone from Carol and Mike, designer shoes from Tyler. Carol didn't even notice what I had made. I stood in the corner, feeling like my heart was breaking into pieces. After the party, I found my photo album in the trash can, mixed up with wrapping paper and leftover cake. I picked it out, cleaned it off, and hid it in my closet. That was the last time I ever made a gift for anyone in that family. Another painful memory happened when I was 15. I decided to do something that would make Mike proud of me. Mike was a quiet man who worked at a car dealership. He didn't talk to me much, but I heard him bragging to his friends about fixing things around the house. I thought if I could fix something too, maybe he would notice me. I snuck out to the garage where Tyler's old skateboard sat broken in the corner. I spent hours with tools Grandpa had given me, trying to make it work again. I stood there feeling like all the air had been sucked out of my lungs. I wanted to explain that I was just trying to help, but the words wouldn't come out. I went to my room, closed the door, and cried until I had no tears left. My childhood went by like this: warm, happy summers with Grandpa and cold, lonely winters in a fancy house that never felt like home. I learned to hide my feelings, to smile even when my heart hurt. I told myself that someday I would find the place where I really belonged. But I didn't know then that finding that place would lead me to discover truths more shocking than anything I could imagine. When I turned 18, I got the chance to leave Dallas. I received a scholarship to study business at Texas State University in Austin. It was only 3 hours away, but to me it felt like traveling to a different planet. On the day I packed my bags, Carol stood in my doorway with her arms crossed. "Take care of yourself," she said in a voice that sounded like she was talking to the mailman. Mike just nodded without looking up from his newspaper. I dragged my suitcase to the car, feeling sad but also excited. Maybe by leaving, I would finally find where I truly belonged. College was like breathing fresh air after being underwater. In Austin, nobody knew me as a step kid or the outsider. I threw myself into my studies, choosing business because I was good with numbers and planning. I spent late nights in the library, wrote long papers, and gave presentations in front of my classmates. These were all chances to prove I was smart and capable, not to Carol and Mike, but to myself. I worked at a pizza place near campus, saving every dollar, so I wouldn't have to ask my step-parents for money. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet and show that I didn't need anyone's approval to succeed. But no matter how hard I tried, the feeling of not belonging followed me like a shadow. Lying in my dorm bed at night, listening to my roommate snore, I often thought about my family back in Dallas. I wonder if they ever missed me, if they were ever proud of how well I was doing in school. I wrote them letters about small victories like getting an A on a big test or being chosen to help teach younger students. But my letters only got short text messages back from Carol. "Good job, Marcus. Keep working hard." Nothing more, Nothing less. I saved those messages on my phone like they were treasure, even though they made me feel empty inside. Every summer, I went to stay with Grandpa instead of going home to Dallas. Those days were still like medicine for my sad heart. Grandpa was getting older now. His hair was completely white, and he walked a little slower, but his eyes still lit up like Christmas morning when he saw me. He taught me new songs on his harmonica, told me stories about adventures he had when he was young, and sometimes he would say those mysterious words again. One day, Marcus, you'll know the whole truth. I would ask him what he meant, but he would just smile, pat my back, and say, when the time is right. I didn't want to push him, but those words grew in my heart like a mystery I couldn't solve. In my last year of college, I graduated with top honors. I was the best student in my business class. At the graduation ceremony, I walked across the stage to get my diploma with a huge smile on my face, but inside I felt empty. I had sent invitations to Carol and Mike, even called them on the phone to invite them personally. We're really busy that weekend, Marcus, Carol said over the phone in her flat voice. But congratulations, I guess. I looked out at all the families in the audience, clapping and cheering and taking pictures. Only Grandpa was there, sitting in the back wearing his best shirt and tie. When I came down from the stage, he hugged me so tight I could feel his heartbeat. I'm so proud of you, buddy, he whispered in my ear. I smiled, but tears started falling down my cheeks. It was the first time I had cried in front of him since I was little. After graduation, I got a job offer from a big company in Dallas. I decided to go back, not for Carol and Mike and Tyler and Sophie, but to be close to Grandpa. The years working in Dallas after college were about building a new version of myself. I worked harder than anyone else at my company, staying late every night and studying reports like they contained the secrets of the universe. My co-workers started calling me Robot Marcus because I never seemed to get tired or complain, but they didn't know that every night when I got home to my small apartment, I would sit in the dark listening to harmonica music on my phone, wondering if I was living the right way. As I got better at my job, I started making more money. I began sending checks to Carol and Mike every month, not because they asked, but because I thought it was the right thing to do. But whenever I called to check on them, Carol would just say things like, "Thanks, but you don't have to do that." Tyler and Sophie, now grown up, still lived at home and depended on Carol and Mike for everything. Tyler had dropped out of college and spent his days playing video games, while Sophie was obsessed with buying expensive clothes and posting pictures on social media. I didn't hate them for it. I just hoped that maybe someday they would see me as their real brother. 5 years later, I got promoted to be a manager at my company. It was a huge deal, not just because I would make more money, but because I felt like I was finally building a life I could be proud of. But no matter how successful I became, I couldn't fill the empty space in my heart. I wanted a real family, not just a big house in Dallas, but people who truly cared about me. Then I got an idea that changed everything. A Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving is when families come together to say thank you for all the good things in their lives. I thought that if I planned a perfect dinner and invited everyone, maybe they would finally see me as more than just Marcus, the stepkid. Maybe this time they would look at me with love in their eyes. I spent weeks getting everything ready. I chose a fancy restaurant in downtown Dallas with tables covered in white cloth and soft lighting from candles everywhere. I reserved a table for 6 people, Carol, Mike, Tyler, Sophie, Grandpa, and me. I wrote beautiful invitations on thick paper with gold writing, pouring my heart into every word. Dear Mom, I wrote on Carol's card, I hope you'll join me to celebrate this special day together. I sent personal text messages to Tyler and Sophie, asking them to please make time for this dinner. I even called Mike directly, telling him how much it would mean to me to have everyone there. "I'll see if I can make it," he said in his usual flat voice. I didn't let that discourage me. I ordered all the food ahead of time: roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie, all the traditional foods I knew they liked. Inside my chest, a warm feeling of hope was growing. Maybe this time they'll come, I told myself, even though part of me was scared they wouldn't. On Thanksgiving Day, I stood in front of the mirror in my apartment, straightening my tie and smoothing down my best blue. I got to the restaurant early at 5:30 p.m., just as the sun was setting and painting Dallas in golden colors. The restaurant manager, a kind woman with a warm smile, showed me to the table I had reserved. Everything looked perfect: clean white tablecloth, 6 shiny place settings, and candles making soft, flickering light. I checked every detail from the folded napkins to the small flowers in the center of the table. "Your family is going to love this," the waitress said with a big smile. I nodded, trying to hide the butterflies dancing in my stomach. "I hope so," I said. I sat down and looked at my watch. 6 p.m., the time I had told everyone to come. The restaurant started filling up with other families, arriving for their Thanksgiving dinners. Their laughter and talking sounded like happy music all around me. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. They're probably just running late, I told myself, but my heart started beating faster with worry. I sent a text to Sophie. "Hey, are you guys on your way? I'm here waiting at the restaurant." No answer. I tried calling Tyler, but the phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. "Hi, Tyler, it's me. I'm at the restaurant waiting. Are you all coming soon?" I said, trying to keep my voice calm and happy. Nobody called me back. By 6:30, I felt hot and cold at the same time. All the tables around me were full of families. At the table next to me, a little girl was giggling as she got mashed potatoes all over her face. An old couple was holding hands across their table, looking at each other like they were still teenagers. I stared at my empty table, with 6 chairs sitting there like they were making fun of me. I called Carol, my hands shaking as I pressed her number. The phone rang 5 times before she picked up. "Marcus." Her voice cut to me like ice. "Mike has a headache, and we already ate at home. You'll be fine by yourself, right?" In the background, I could hear Sophie laughing, the sound of dishes clinking, Tyler saying something about a football game on TV. They were all at home, gathered together like they always were, acting like I had never existed. "Yeah, I'll be fine," I said, my voice cracking like I was going through puberty again. I hung up, put my phone on the table, and stared at the flickering candles. Their light reflected in my water glass, but it didn't make me feel warm. I felt like the whole world was having a party, and I was locked outside in the cold. I called the waitress over and asked for just a small plate of turkey and potatoes. "Just you tonight?" she asked gently, and I could hear pity in her voice. I nodded, forcing myself to smile. "Yeah, just me." The food was placed in front of me. It smelled amazing, like roasted turkey and herbs, and all the good things about Thanksgiving. But every bite felt like swallowing rocks. I looked at the empty chairs where Carol was supposed to sit, where Mike and Tyler and Sophie should have been. I imagined them at home, eating the same foods I had ordered, but without me. Tears started building up in my eyes, but I bit my lip hard, refusing to let them fall. I had cried enough when I was a kid. I told myself I was stronger now, but the truth was I wasn't strong at all. I was just a 28-year-old man sitting alone in a fancy restaurant, trying to hold on to a dream that had been broken for years. I wondered what I had done wrong. I had studied hard, worked my tail off, sent them money, planned this dinner with all the love in my heart. So why didn't they choose me? I stared at my plate of turkey, which was getting cold, and felt like I was eating my own sadness. The waitress walked by and her eyes were full of sympathy. "Are you okay, sweetie?" she asked. I nodded, but I knew I wasn't okay. I had never been okay. I reached my phone, planning to call Grandpa. He was the one person I knew would never leave me hanging. But before I could dial his number, the restaurant door opened and cold November air rushed in, bringing the smell of autumn leaves. I looked up and my heart almost stopped beating. Grandpa walked in wearing his old brown coat, his white hair shining under the restaurant lights. He looked around the room until his eyes found mine, and that familiar smile spread across his weathered face. "Sorry I'm late, buddy," he said in his warm voice that sounded like home. He sat down across from me, putting his rough hands on the table and holding mine tight. His hand shook a little bit, but their warmth pulled me back on the edge of total despair. "Grandpa," I whispered, my voice breaking like a twig. "I thought maybe you weren't coming either." He shook his head, his eyes full of love, but also a sadness I couldn't understand. I would never leave you alone, Marcus. Not ever. He squeezed my hands, and then his voice became serious, like he was about to tell me something more important than anything else in my entire life. Marcus, he said, looking straight into my eyes, have you ever wondered why I've always loved you more than anyone else in this world? His question hit me like lightning striking my chest. I stared at him, unable to speak, feeling like time had stopped completely. The candles on our table kept flickering, but everything else in the world seemed to disappear, leaving just me and Grandpa. I knew this question wasn't simple. It was carrying a secret, a truth he had been hiding for years. Why, Grandpa? I asked, my voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. He took a deep breath like he was gathering courage to climb a mountain. He looked out the window where the Dallas City lights were starting to twinkle in the darkness. Marcus, he began, his voice low and careful. There are things I've wanted to tell you for a very long time, but I was waiting for the right moment. And maybe tonight is that moment. He paused, his eyes coming back to mine, filled with determination. You're not just my grandson, buddy. You're a part of a story that both you and I have been living, but you didn't know it. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might jump out of my chest. I felt like I was standing in front of a locked door, and Grandpa was holding the key. What story, Grandpa? I asked, my voice barely louder than a whisper. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old envelope that looked yellow with age. He placed it on the table and slid it toward me. Open it, Marcus, he said softly. But before you do, I need you to promise me something. No matter how much the truth hurts, don't let it destroy the good person you become. I looked at the envelope, my hand shaking as it showed a young woman with brown hair and green eyes exactly like mine. She was smiling, but her smile looked like it was hiding a lot of pain. I looked at Grandpa with confused eyes. Who is this, Grandpa? He took a long breath like he was gathering courage to tell a story he had kept locked away for too many years. Marcus, he began, his voice low and careful. The woman in that photo is your real mother. I felt like all the blood in my body had turned to ice water. I looked back at the photo, my hands shaking like leaves in a storm. My real mother. I had heard Carol mention her a few times, but always in an angry way, like she was a bad person who had abandoned me. But the face in this photo didn't look like a bad person. She looked fragile and sad, like someone carrying the weight of the whole world on her shoulders. You need to know the real story, Grandpa continued, his voice heavy like storm clouds. But first, let me start from the very beginning. He paused, looking out the window at the dim lights of Dallas at night. About 30 years ago, I worked as a security guard for a rich family in Houston. They had lots of money and power, but they also had lots of problems and drama, the kind of family you see in movies. The woman in the photo, her name was Jessica, was the oldest daughter of that family. She was smart and beautiful, but her heart belonged to a man her family hated. I listened, feeling like I was falling into a story that belonged to someone else's life. Grandpa explained that Jessica had fallen in love with a poor man, a traveling artist named Tommy. He had a charming smile and big dreams, but Jessica's family saw him as someone who just wanted their money. When Jessica got pregnant, her family was furious. They kicked her out of the house, cut off all her money, leaving her alone with a baby on the way. Tommy, the man Jessica had trusted with her whole heart, ran away when he realized he couldn't get any money from her rich family. Jessica was left all by herself, homeless, with no family, carrying an unborn baby. Me. Jessica came to me during her darkest days, Grandpa said, his eyes clouding over like he was remembering something painful. She had been thrown out by her parents, living in a tiny apartment in the worst part of Houston, working at a diner to survive. I had helped her get that job after she lost everything, and we became close friends. She told me about her dreams, about wanting to give her baby a better life, but she knew she couldn't do it. Not then, not when she had nothing. He paused, his voice catching in his throat. When you were born, Jessica begged me for help. She said she needed time to rebuild her life, to become a mother who could take care of you properly. She asked me to find you a good home. My chest felt tight like someone was squeezing it. I looked at the photo, trying to imagine this woman, my mother, during those lonely, scary days. "So what did you do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Grandpa lowered his head, his hands squeezing together tightly. At that time, my son Mike and Carol had been married for a few years, but couldn't have children of their own. I convinced them to adopt you. I thought it was the best way to give you a family, a good home. I was wrong. He paused, his eyes filled with regret that looked like it had been growing for years. I didn't expect them to treat you the way they did. I thought they would love you like their own child. But every time I saw them push you away, it broke my heart into pieces. I looked back at the photograph. I didn't know what to feel, anger, sadness, or just complete emptiness. What happened to my real mother? I asked, my voice shaking. Where did she go? Grandpa picked up the business card from the table and handed it to me. "Jessica is a successful woman now," he said. "After she left you with us, she moved far away and started over. She went to college, built a career, and now she owns her own company in San Francisco. She's been looking for you for more than 10 years. Recently, she found me. She wants to meet you, Marcus, but she's afraid of messing up your life. She wants you to decide if you want to see her." I took the business card and read the name, Jessica Martinez, CEO, Martinez Design Studio, an address in San Francisco, a phone number. I turned the card over in my hands, feeling like I was holding a piece of my own soul. Then I opened the letter, seeing handwriting that was soft and slanted like mine. "Dear Marcus," it began, "I don't know if you'll ever want to hear from me, but not a single day has passed without me thinking about you." I stopped reading, feeling like someone had squeezed all the air out of my lungs. I glanced at Grandpa, sitting across from me with his weathered hands folded tightly, his eyes showing worry and patience at the same time. I knew he was waiting, watching to see how I would react to this life-changing truth. I took a deep breath and kept reading. "I'm writing this letter hoping that someday you'll read it. Even though I'm not sure you'll want to hear from me. I made the biggest mistake of my life when I let you go. But please believe me, it wasn't because I didn't love you. You were my sunshine, the only thing that kept me going during my darkest hours. When I was pregnant with you, I was just a scared young girl, kicked out by my family, abandoned by the man I loved. I had nothing except my love for you, but I knew I couldn't give you the life you deserved. Henry, your grandpa, was the only person who didn't turn his back on me. He promised to take care of you, and I trusted him with my whole heart. I left not because I wanted to forget you, but because I wanted to become a mother you could be proud of. I went to school, worked every hour of every day, and now I built a stable life. But not one single day has passed without me thinking about you, wondering how you're living, if you're happy, if you're healthy. I've been searching for you for more than 10 years. But every time I think about meeting you, I get scared. Scared that you'll hate me. Scared that I'll mess up your life. If you're reading this letter, I only ask for one chance. A chance to explain, to say the apology I've been holding in my heart for 28 years. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I hope someday you'll understand. I love you, Marcus. I always have. Your mother, Jessica Martinez. I folded the letter carefully, tears silently rolling down my cheeks. I didn't know why I was crying. For Jessica's pain, for the years I grew up feeling unwanted by Carol and Mike, or for the strange feeling of finding a missing piece of myself while being afraid it might break me completely. I looked at the photograph again, at Jessica's face, her green eyes that were exactly like mine. I tried to imagine her during those days when she was young and scared, holding me one last time before giving me to Grandpa. I didn't know what to feel, anger, pity, or just a confusing emptiness that seemed to go on forever. "Grandpa," I said, my voice choked up like I had swallowed cotton. "What do I do now?" I put the letter on the table, looking at him desperately, searching for an answer, some kind of direction. Should I meet her or just forget all this and keep living like I never knew the truth? Grandpa took my hands, his rough, warm ones. "Marcus," he said, his voice gentle like a lullaby. I can't make this decision for you. This truth belongs to you, and only you know what your heart is telling you to do. I just want you to remember one thing. No matter which path you choose, you're never alone. I'll always be here for you, and Jessica is waiting for you too. I looked into his eyes, seeing all the love and honesty he had given me throughout my whole life. He wasn't just my grandpa. He was the person who had kept his promise to Jessica, who had protected me when the world felt cold and empty. I took a deep breath, feeling a decision forming in my heart like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. I want to meet her, I said, my voice steadier than I expected it to be. I want to go to San Francisco. I need to see what she's like now, and I need to hear her story with my own ears. Grandpa smiled, a smile that showed both pride and relief. Then follow your heart, buddy. But before you go, is there anything else you need to do? Anything you want to settle before you start this new chapter of your life? I thought for a moment. Then an idea sparked in my mind like a match being lit. I want to go to Carol and Mike's house, I said, my voice quiet but determined. I want to tell them about this, not to fight or blame them, but to let them know I found a piece of myself. I want them to understand that I'm not the stepkid they can ignore anymore. Grandpa nodded, a glint of determination in his old eyes. All right, Marcus. I'll come with you. Whatever happens, I'll be right there by your side. We left the restaurant, my mind still spinning from Jessica's letter. The Dallas night was cold, with wind that made me shiver, but having Grandpa beside me made me feel strong and grounded. We got into his old pickup truck, which smelled like leather and coffee. Smells that reminded me of all those wonderful summers at his house. You sure about this, Marcus? He asked as he started the engine. Facing him isn't going to be easy. I'm sure, I replied, though part of me was still scared. I didn't know how Carol and Mike would react, but I knew I needed to do this, not to prove anything to them, but to close one chapter of my life before opening the next one. We drove through Dallas streets that I knew by heart, past houses glowing with warm Thanksgiving lights where real families were gathered together. When we pulled up to the big house where I had grown up, my heart was pounding like thunder. Light poured out of the living room windows, and I could hear Sophie's laughter and Tyler's loud voice. They were still celebrating like my dinner invitation had never existed. I stepped out of the truck, with Grandpa right beside me. I knocked on the front door, and when Carol opened it, her eyes flickered with surprise before turning back to their usual coldness. Marcus, she said, her voice as flat as cardboard, what are you doing here so late? I need to talk to everyone, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She hesitated, but opened the door wider. I stepped inside with Grandpa following me and saw Mike in his favorite chair, watching TV. Tyler and Sophie were on the couch eating leftover pie. They all looked at me, but nobody stood up to greet me or ask how I was doing. What's this about, Marcus? Mike asked, his tone slightly annoyed, like I was a door-to-door salesman interrupting his evening. I took a deep breath, feeling Grandpa's hand rest gently on my shoulder. I just learned the truth about my real mother, I said, my voice firm but shaking with emotion. She's alive, and I'm going to San Francisco to meet her. I wanted you all to know because I've called you family for 28 years. Silence filled the room like thick fog. Sophie stopped chewing her pie, her eyes showing confusion and unease. Tyler smirked like he was about to make a mean joke, but Grandpa's stern look made him close his mouth. Carol crossed her arms, her gaze as cold as winter ice. Is that so? She said, her voice dripping with sarcasm like honey mixed with poison. You think finding your real mother is going to change anything? You're still just a stepkid, Marcus. Don't get any big ideas. Her words cut like broken glass, but this time I didn't let them knock me down. I'm not getting big ideas, I replied, meeting her cold stare with my own steady gaze. I just want to live as my true self. Thank you for giving me a place to live, but I don't need anyone in this room to tell me I'm worth something anymore. Mike stood up, about to say something harsh, but Grandpa raised his hand like a traffic cop. That's enough, Mike, he said, his voice like rolling thunder. You've had 28 years to treat this boy like a real son, and you failed completely. Now let him walk his own path without your negativity. I turned around and walked out of that house, feeling like I had just dropped a heavy backpack I'd been carrying for years. Grandpa followed me, and as we got back in his truck, he squeezed my hand. "You did great, buddy," he said, his voice full of pride that made my chest warm. "I'm proud of the man you become." Back at my apartment, I started getting ready for the trip to San Francisco. I held Jessica's business card in my hands, staring at her phone number, but my finger hesitated over the call button. I wasn't ready to hear her voice yet, not ready to talk to the woman who gave birth to me. But I knew I needed to meet her face to face, to look into her green eyes that matched mine, and understand why she left me and whether she truly loved me like she wrote in her letter. I looked at Grandpa sitting on my couch, holding the coffee I had made for him in his favorite mug. "Will you come with me to San Francisco?" I asked. He smiled that familiar smile that had been my anchor through so many storms. "If you want me there, I'll go anywhere with you, buddy. But this is your journey to take. I'm just along to support you." I nodded, feeling a new kind of fire burning in my heart. I would go to San Francisco, face Jessica, and find answers to the questions that had haunted me for 28 long years. 2 days later, Grandpa and I were on an early morning flight to San Francisco. He wore his best jacket and gripped the armrest tightly as the plane took off into clouds. "I don't much like flying," he muttered with a nervous chuckle, but his smile stayed warm and encouraging. I looked out the small airplane window at the white clouds floating below us like cotton balls, wondering if Jessica was thinking about me as much as I was thinking about her. I kept Jessica's business card in my shirt pocket, my fingers tracing the words Martinez Design Studio over and over. I pictured Jessica as a strong, successful businesswoman, but in my mind I still saw the young, scared girl from the photograph, the woman with sad eyes and a fragile smile who had given me up because she had no other choice. When our plane landed at San Francisco International Airport, my heart started beating faster. Grandpa and I checked into a small hotel near the waterfront. After we got settled in our room, he took out his phone and called Jessica's number. I sat on the edge of bed with my hands clenched together, listening to every single word he said. "Jessica, it's me, Henry," he began, his voice calm and steady. "I'm in San Francisco with Marcus. He wants to meet you." After a short conversation that felt like it lasted forever, he hung up and turned to me with gentle eyes. "Jessica will meet us at a coffee shop near Fisherman's Wharf tomorrow afternoon. She's emotional, Marcus, but she's also scared, just like you are." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. That afternoon, Grandpa and I walked into a cozy coffee shop with big windows overlooking San Francisco Bay. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the salty ocean air drifting in from outside. The shop had brick walls covered with local artwork, small wooden tables, and soft light from hanging lanterns that made everything feel warm and welcoming. I chose a table by the window where I could watch boats sailing on the sparkling blue water. Grandpa sat across from me, quietly watching my face. "You okay, buddy?" he asked softly. "I don't know," I admitted honestly, my hands twisting together nervously, my leg bouncing up and down under the table. "I don't know what to say to her, what to do. What if she's not what I'm expecting? What if I'm not what she's expecting?" Grandpa put his weathered hand over mine, stopping my fidgeting. "Just be yourself, Marcus. That's all Jessica wants, to meet the wonderful young man you become." I nodded, but my heart was still pounding like drums at a rock concert. The clock on the wall read 2:55 p.m. I kept looking at the door, jumping every time someone walked in, hoping and fearing it would be Jessica. Then, at exactly 3 p.m., the door opened with a gentle chime. A woman walked in wearing a long gray coat, her brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She had glasses perched on her nose, but I instantly recognized those deep green eyes, the same eyes from the photograph, identical to the ones I saw in the mirror every morning. She looked around the coffee shop nervously, and when her gaze met mine, she froze like a deer in headlights. I saw her hand tremble slightly as she walked toward our table, each step careful and hesitant. I stood up, my legs feeling wobbly like a newborn colt. Grandpa stood too, offering Jessica his warm, encouraging smile. "Jessica," he said gently, "this is Marcus. Jessica looked at me from head to toe, her eyes stopping when she noticed a small scar on my chin from when I fell off my bike as a kid. A trembling smile spread across her face, like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "You look so much like me when I was your age. You're more handsome than I ever imagined." I didn't know what to say. All I could do was stand there, staring at the woman who had given birth to me, who had carried me for 9 months, who had made the hardest decision of her life. There were no dramatic tears or movie scene hugs, just an awkward mixture of hope and fear, like we were both afraid that moving too fast might shatter this fragile moment. Jessica stepped forward slowly, and before I could react, she wrapped her arms around me in a gentle hug. It wasn't a tight, overwhelming embrace, but a careful one, like she was holding something precious that might break. I felt her warmth, smelled her light perfume that reminded me of flowers, and experienced a strange feeling, like I had found a missing piece of a puzzle I didn't even know was incomplete. She whispered in my ear, her voice thick with tears she was trying not to cry. "Can you ever forgive me for all the years you spent feeling alone?" I didn't answer immediately. I hugged her back carefully, feeling like time had stopped completely around us. I thought about my childhood in Dallas, the cold nights in my small room, the times Carol and Mike made me feel invisible, the birthdays when I pretended not to care that they forgot. I want to say I forgave her completely, but the words got stuck in my throat. Not because I didn't want to forgive Jessica, but because I was still learning to forgive myself for letting pain define who I was for so many years. I pulled back gently, looked into her green eyes that were exactly like mine, and whispered, "I'm here now, Mom." It was all I could manage to say in that overwhelming moment, but it seemed to be enough. Jessica smiled through her unshed tears, a hopeful smile that lit up her whole face. We sat down at the small table, Grandpa quietly watching over us like a guardian angel. The coffee shop bustled with the sound of other customers talking and laughing, the hiss of the espresso machine, and seagulls calling outside the windows. But in that moment, my entire world revolved around the woman sitting across from me, the woman who had given me life, then given me away, and was now trying to find her way back to me. "Tell me about your life," Jessica said, her voice soft but eager, like she was thirsty for every detail. "I want to know everything about how you grew up, what you liked to do, what made you happy. If you're comfortable sharing it with me." I looked down at my coffee cup, watching steam rise from the dark liquid. I didn't know where to begin. How could I sum up 28 years of feeling like an outsider, of trying to earn love that never came, but also the beautiful summers with Grandpa that kept me sane? I told her about Dallas, about the big house that never felt like home, about how I tried to be the perfect stepson, but was always treated like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. I shared stories about summers at Grandpa's place, where I learned to ride horses and catch fireflies and play simple songs on his harmonica. But I didn't mention the nights I cried myself to sleep, or finding my handmade gifts in the trash, or the constant feeling that I wasn't good enough. Those scars were still too deep, and I wasn't ready to show them to someone I had just met, even if she was my mother. Jessica listened with her hands wrapped around her coffee mug, as if she needed something to hold on to keep from falling apart. When I mentioned Grandpa, she looked at him with eyes full of gratitude that seemed to go back decades. "Thank you, Henry," she said, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. "Thank you for keeping your promise to me, and for taking better care of my son than I ever could have back then." Grandpa simply nodded, his weathered face showing the wisdom of someone who had lived through many storms. I knew he was giving Jessica and me space to reconnect, even though this was just the very beginning of a long and complicated journey. After our emotional meeting at the coffee shop, Jessica invited Grandpa and me to see her apartment in downtown San Francisco. It was a beautiful place on the top floor of a modern building, with huge windows that looked out over the glittering San Francisco Bay. The inside was decorated simply but elegantly. Polished wooden floors, comfortable furniture in soft colors, and paintings on the walls that she had created herself. As I looked around, I couldn't help but compare it to that tiny room in Dallas where I had grown up, with its single small window and hand-me-down furniture. Jessica led us to her living room and made tea in delicate china cups that looked like they belonged in a fancy hotel. "Marcus," She began carefully, like someone walking on thin ice. I know I have no right to ask anything of you after all these years, but I want you to give me a chance to make up for lost time. If you want, you can move here to San Francisco. I can help you find a great job at a design company, or anything else you're interested in. I just want you to know that you always have a place here with me. Her offer made my head spin like a carnival ride. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. A fresh start, a real family, a place where I wouldn't have to prove I was worthy of love. But another part of me hesitated. I had spent my entire life learning to stand on my own 2 feet, depending on nobody but myself. Accepting Jessica's help, even though she was my mother, felt like giving up something important. Maybe it was my pride, or maybe it was fear of being disappointed again. I looked at Grandpa, searching his kind eyes for guidance. He gave me that gentle smile that had guided me through so many difficult decisions. "What does your heart tell you, Marcus?" he asked softly. I took a deep breath, trying to sort through all the tangled thoughts and feelings in my head. "Thank you, Mom," I said, looking directly at Jessica. "But I don't want to start with a job you've arranged for me. If I work in San Francisco, I want to start at the bottom like any other person and work my way up. I want to succeed because I've earned it, not because I'm your son." Jessica looked at me with eyes that sparkled with a mixture of surprise and pride. "You're more independent and strong than I ever imagined," she said, her smile growing wider. "All right, Marcus. I respect your decision completely. But whatever you choose to do, I want you to know I'll always be here for you." I nodded, feeling like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I wasn't just choosing a job or a place to live. I was choosing how to find myself as a person. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt like I had the right to make that choice. A few days later, Jessica and I convinced Grandpa to move to San Francisco permanently. "I'm getting old, Marcus," he said with a teasing twinkle in his eyes. "But if you and Jessica want this grumpy old cowboy hanging around, I suppose I can get used to city life." Jessica laughed, and it was the first time I had heard her laugh freely and naturally. "Henry, there's always a place for you in my home," she said warmly. "And I think a small herb garden on my balcony would be perfect for you." I smiled, picturing Grandpa in Jessica's modern apartment, growing tomatoes and herbs like he did back home. The thought filled my heart with warmth. Grandpa wasn't just a man who had raised me through my loneliest years. He was a bridge connecting Jessica and me, the person who had kept his promise to both of us. I decided to stay in Jessica's apartment building, at least for a while, so I could be close to Grandpa and get to know the mother I had been separated from for 28 years. I found a job as a junior graphic designer at a small but respected design firm in the city, not because Jessica pulled any strings, but because my portfolio impressed them during the interview. On my first day, standing in front of the company's glass building with the San Francisco fog rolling in from the ocean, I felt like a kid starting his first day of school. But this time, I wasn't afraid of being rejected or ignored. I had Jessica, Grandpa, and most importantly, I had found my true self. The weeks that followed in San Francisco were like living in a beautiful dream that I was afraid might end. Jessica and I started slowly, with small things, sharing meals together, talking about our favorite books and movies, discovering that we both loved the same kind of music. She told me about her college years, how she worked 3 jobs while studying, how she would look at herself in the mirror and promise that she would succeed so she could find me someday. I shared stories about those magical summers with Grandpa, how he taught me to play harmonica, and told me tales about Texas that I now realize were connected to her story. Grandpa adapted to San Francisco life faster than any of us expected. One evening, we all sat together on Jessica's balcony, watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. Grandpa played a familiar folk song on his harmonica, and Jessica surprised us both by singing along softly, her voice blending perfectly with the music. I watched them together, feeling my heart slowly healing, piece by piece, like a broken vase being carefully glued back together. But healing wasn't simple or easy. Some nights I would lie awake thinking about Carol and Mike and Tyler and Sophie back in Dallas. I still felt pain when I remembered Carol's cold words, Tyler's mean jokes, or Sophie's indifference. I wondered if they ever thought about me, if they ever regretted pushing me out of their lives like I was nothing special. But then I would realize that I no longer needed their approval or their apologies. I had found where I truly belonged, not in a fancy house, but in the hearts of people who chose to love me for exactly who I was. San Francisco became part of my soul in just a few short months. Every morning I would wake up in my small apartment near the design studio, listening to foghorns from ships in the bay and smelling coffee drifting up from the cafe below my window. I was no longer the lonely boy in the Dallas suburbs, desperately trying to please a family that never really wanted me. I was Marcus, 28 years old, a graphic designer building his life one day at a time with Jessica and Grandpa cheering me on. But sometimes the past reaches out to grab you, no matter how far you try to run from it. One evening, after finishing a big project at work, I sat at my kitchen table and decided to write one final letter to my stepfamily. Not to blame them or ask for anything, but to officially close the most painful chapter of my life. I didn't need them to write back or to apologize for the past. That letter was my way of saying goodbye to the years I spent trying to fit into a place where I was never truly welcome. 3 months later, I received an unexpected text message from Sophie. It came while I was having lunch with a co-worker at a restaurant near my office, and seeing her name on my phone screen made my stomach drop. The message was short, but Sophie's tone was different from her usual coldness. Marcus, Mom and Dad are in serious trouble. Tyler gambled away their savings and maxed out their credit cards. They might lose the house. Can you help us? I stared at the message, feeling like a cold wind from Dallas had just blown across San Francisco Bay. I wasn't surprised that Tyler had gotten into trouble. He had always been careless with money, spending whatever he wanted while Carol and Mike paid his bills. Sophie wasn't much better, always buying expensive clothes and taking fancy vacations on their parents' credit cards. But this time, I didn't feel obligated to rescue them. I had sent them money for years, only to receive coldness and rejection in return. Now I had a new life, a real family, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their drama. I showed the text to Grandpa when I got home that evening. He was on Jessica's balcony, tending to the small garden he had started in pots and planters. He read the message, then shook his head with a look of stern disapproval. Marcus, he said, his voice firm but loving, you've done more than enough for those people over the years. They had every chance to treat you right, and they chose not to. Don't let them pull you back into their mess now. You deserve to live your own life in peace. I nodded, feeling the truth in his words settle into my heart like seeds in good soil. A few weeks later, Grandpa told me he had called Mike directly and made it crystal clear that I was no longer available to solve their problems. I told them they need to face the consequences of their choices, he said, his eyes flashing with protective determination. They can't use you as their personal ATM anymore. I didn't ask for more details, but I knew Grandpa had done what needed to be done. My step-family, with their expensive lifestyle and Tyler and Sophie's irresponsible spending, was facing financial ruin. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty about their problems. I had given them enough chances, enough money, enough of my heart. It was time to focus completely on my own future and the people who truly loved me.